Imagine you are trying to solve a deeply modern crisis, like, let's say, the psychological toll of globalization on university students.
Right, a very common issue.
Yeah. And if you walk into a traditional Western university to research this, they are going to hand you, a spreadsheet, a list of variables, and maybe a survey software login.
Oh, absolutely. That is standard operating procedure.
But what if you went somewhere else? And instead of a spreadsheet, they handed you a 2,500-year-old spiritual diagnostic tool.
I mean, it completely reframes how we think about the entire purpose of data, really.
It does.
Because, we are so used to seeing ancient spiritual wisdom and modern academic research as, well, two entirely separate domains.
Right, like oil and water.
Exactly. One is about looking inward at the soul, and the other is about looking outward at, measurable data points.
And that collision of worlds is exactly what we are exploring in this deep dive today. We are taking you, the listener, inside a masterclass based on a very specific, highly unique university course.
Yeah, it's really fascinating.
It is called Research Methodology in Buddhism. Specifically, course number 625-103.
Which is taught by Assistant Professor Dr. Wattanapradith.
Right.
And this takes place at the International Buddhist Studies College, which is part of Mahachulalongkorn Rajavidyalaya University in Thailand.
That is a prestigious institution, yeah.
It is. And to give you a sense of the institutional culture right away, their motto is simply wisdom for the world.
I love that.
Yeah, it's not just about acquiring knowledge for the sake of it, It is about deploying it.
Which totally changes the baseline of what a research methodology course is even supposed to accomplish.
Definitely.
So whether you are a student, a professional dealing with complex organizational problems, or just someone who wants to understand how to solve problems more effectively, we are going to extract Dr. Wattanapradith's framework today.
And I think we should start by looking at how the course itself is structured, because the syllabus really gives away the underlying philosophy here.
Oh, for sure. Dive into that.
Well, in a typical Western statistics or methods class, your grade is entirely dependent on your ability to crunch numbers or, write a solid proposal.
Right, the purely intellectual stuff.
Exactly. And Dr. Wattanapradith's course definitely demands that intellectual rigor.
Yep.
Like, they evaluate your knowledge through midterm and final exams. That's 45% of the grade.
Okay, pretty standard so far.
And then 20% is for a pilot research proposal, and another 20% is for a pilot study presentation and report, which tests numerical analysis.
Got it.
But then there is this remaining 15% for class participation and presentations, which the syllabus explicitly says is evaluating moral and interpersonal outcomes.
Wait, let me stop you right there, because that is a massive departure from standard academia.
It really is.
Usually, science prides itself on being entirely divorced from morality, right?
Right.
It's supposed to be like cold, objective observation.
Yeah, totally detached.
And you are saying this professor actively evaluates students on their moral development through their class participation.
He does, yeah. And if you think about it, divorcing research from morality is a relatively modern Western concept. In this framework, you cannot be a good researcher if you are, disconnected from the ethical implications of your work.
Wow. Okay.
You are required to submit weekly one-page summaries of lectures and pass in-class quizzes, so, the intellectual demand is very high.
Right. They aren't taking it easy on them.
Not at all. But if you aren't engaging with your peers ethically and morally, you just aren't fully grasping the methodology.
So we have this environment that demands both rigorous intellect and intense moral engagement.
Yeah.
But, a moral researcher still has to actually find a problem to solve, right? They can't just study goodness in a vacuum.
No, of course not.
In fact, the source material has this strict rule, quote, no research can be done without research problems.
Right, which sounds incredibly obvious until you actually have to define what a problem is in an academic sense.
So true.
No.
It's harder than it sounds.
It really is. And Dr. Wattanapradith uses this brilliant visual concept to define it. He calls it the gap.
Oh, yeah. I really liked this visual when I was reading through the materials.
It's so helpful.
If I'm understanding it correctly, you can kind of think of it like being a structural engineer trying to build a bridge.
Okay, I like that analogy.
You don't just start stacking concrete blocks in the middle of an empty field just because you have a vague desire to build something.
Right, that would be useless.
You have to find two disconnected cliffs.
Exactly. And Dr. Wattanapradith labels those two cliffs very specifically in his slides. On one side, you have expectation.
The expectation.
Yeah, this is the ideal state, what we want to happen. I want to do this.
And on the other cliff, you have reality.
Yes, the big reality.
The big but.
Yeah.
Like, I want this community to be healthy. But they are experiencing high levels of addiction.
Right, exactly.
So the expectation's on the left, the reality's on the right, and the empty air between them is the gap. So the research itself is the literal architecture designed to span that empty space.
It is a highly practical way to look at academia. The gap essentially equals the problem.
No gap, no problem.
Exactly. If there is no gap between expectation and reality, there is literally nothing to research.
But just knowing that a gap exists doesn't tell you how to build the bridge.
No, it doesn't.
You need tools for that.
Yeah.
And this brings us to the actual methodologies taught in the course, which is where things take a really unexpected turn.
Well, to be fair, the course does lay a foundation with the standard tools first.
Oh, right.
It covers qualitative research, which is largely document-based.
Like literature and texts.
Yeah. For example, a student might dive into ancient Buddhist scriptures to analyze the historical concept of peace.
Gotcha.
It also covers case studies like looking deeply at a specific model individual or an organization or doing comparative studies.
And then it covers quantitative research, which is the numbers game.
Right. Crunching data.
Like exploring moral issues across different regions using survey research, or investigating how different variables and hypotheses relate to each other in a large population.
Exactly.
Which all sounds like a completely standard sociology course.
It does. Up to this point, it is very standard. But then we reach the third pillar of methodology, which is entirely unique to this specific environment.
Here we go.
Integrating Buddhist principles. This is where Dr. Wattanapradith introduces mixed method and action participatory research.
Action participatory, meaning the researcher isn't just watching subjects through a one-way mirror like a lab rat.
Yeah, not at all.
They are actively collaborating with the community to create change while studying it at the same time.
Precisely. But the framework they use to drive that action is what's truly revolutionary here. They apply problem solving based directly on the Four Noble Truths.
See, and this is where I really struggled to wrap my head around the source material at first.
It's a huge paradigm shift.
Because in traditional academia, religion is a subject. Like, an anthropologist might study how a village practices Buddhism.
Right, as an observer.
But here, the Four Noble Truths aren't the subject being studied. They're being used as the actual scientific method itself to study things like globalization or education.
Yeah, it's wild.
How does a spiritual philosophy actually function as a scientific methodology without, losing its objectivity?
Well, to understand that, you have to strip away the Western assumption that the Four Noble Truths are just mystical religious dogma.
Okay.
At their core, they are actually a highly systematic diagnostic tool.
Diagnostic tool.
Yeah. Let's map them onto a social problem. The first noble truth is about identifying suffering.
Right.
So in academic terms, that is clearly defining your current problem or the reality side of the gap we just talked about.
Oh, wow. Okay, so suffering basically equals the problem definition.
Exactly. Then the second truth investigates the root cause of that suffering. In a research paper, this is your variable analysis. Like, why is this problem happening? What are the causal factors here?
Right, you're looking for the variables driving the issue.
Yes. Then the third truth establishes the cessation of suffering.
Which would be the goal.
This is your hypothesis or your ultimate goal.
Yeah.
It is the belief that the problem can actually be solved, which maps to the expectation cliff.
Which leaves the fourth noble truth, which is traditionally the path to enlightenment.
Right, but in an action participatory research context, the path is your specific action plan.
Ah.
It is the methodology and the actual intervention you are going to deploy to reach that goal.
That is just brilliant.
Isn't it? Diagnosing human suffering maps perfectly onto diagnosing an educational or social variable.
That is fascinating. So you aren't just reading ancient texts. You are extracting the underlying logic of those texts to fix real-world modern issues.
Exactly.
And the slides provide some very concrete examples of this, which helped ground it for me.
Yeah, the examples are great.
Take the philosophy and doctrine category. You could be comparing Theravada Buddhism's concept of karma with the Samkhya Yoga philosophy, or even comparing Kant's goodwill with Buddhist philosophy.
Right, highly theoretical, but then look at the history and society category.
Yeah.
a student isn't just studying monks meditating in a temple. They're researching the active role of monks in forest conservation,
Wow.
or how they use social work to mitigate the impacts of globalization on local villages.
It scales from the macro to the micro so beautifully.
It really does.
Like the examples in education and psychology. You could use Buddhist principles to develop teaching methods that enhance the quality of life in a specific community.
Or one of the most compelling examples from the slides, studying the relationship between an elderly person's faith and their social relationship.
Oh, I love that one.
Mhm.
Let's actually run that specific example through the Four Noble Truths methodology, just to see the mechanics of it in real time.
Let's do it.
So, the first truth, the suffering, is the isolation and depression experienced by the elderly population.
Right. And then the second truth, the cause might be, say, rapid urbanization that strips away their traditional roles in the family structure.
Makes sense. So the third truth is the goal, psychological well-being and social reintegration,
Exactly.
which means the fourth truth, the path, would be the actual intervention the researcher designs.
Yes.
Maybe they use local temples as community centers to rebuild those social ties, and then they rigorously measure the psychological outcomes.
You've got it. That is sociology, psychology, and theology completely intertwined into one practical project.
It proves the methodology is really robust.
Mm-hmm.
But, having a great methodology doesn't mean you automatically have a good project.
Oh, definitely not.
Dr. Wattanapradith spends a lot of time in the course addressing a really common trap for eager students, which is picking a terrible topic.
Right, because if you are driven by moral engagement, your instinct is probably to tackle something massive.
Yeah, you want to save the world.
Exactly. A student might walk in and say, I want to research how to end all conflict in Southeast Asia using Buddhism.
Which has a great moral drive.
But it's completely unworkable for a single class project.
Right. Which is why the course introduces extreme friction when it comes to selecting a topic.
Yes, there are a lot of rules.
You can draw inspiration from your own experiences or social phenomena, but it has to align with reality.
He directs students to look at very practical sources for inspiration,
Like what?
like national economic and social development plans, or government policy, or utilization requirements.
Meaning, your research shouldn't just be an isolated vanity project that sits on a shelf.
No, not at all.
If you tie it to what the nation actually needs to develop right now, your findings have a built-in mechanism for real-world application.
Exactly. And then he filters the idea through a strict set of problem characteristics. There are 7 rules here.
7 rules, wow.
Yeah. Your problem might be morally significant, but is it actually solvable by research methods?
It's a good question.
Can you measure it? If it is entirely abstract, you can't research it.
It also has to be plannable,
Yeah.
right? And have an appropriate scope for your resources.
Right. You have 1 semester and limited funds.
Yeah, you cannot cure global isolation on a student budget.
Yeah.
You have to shrink the scope down to a specific demographic in a specific location.
Yeah.
It has to be highly bounded.
And crucially, it cannot be redundant.
Oh, this is a big one.
If another researcher has already answered your exact question, you are wasting your time. You have to change the location, the population, or the methods to ensure you are actually adding new knowledge to the field.
It has to clearly identify who, what, where, and how.
Yes. And you need to stick to just 1 to 3 research questions, tops.
So after running this gauntlet, you have a perfectly scoped, non-redundant, highly practical problem.
You do.
You just have to name it. And I gotta say, the criteria for writing a research title in this course includes something that completely caught me off guard.
Oh, I know exactly what you're referring to. The rule about melody.
Yes, the melody rule.
It's so unique.
The slides state that the title should be short, indicate the type of research, and state the purpose and variables.
Which is standard stuff.
Very standard. But then Dr. Wattanapradith explicitly instructs students that the title should be in the form of a noun to create melody, rather than using a verb before the title.
Right.
I have to be honest, when I think of academic research titles, melodic is literally the last word that comes to mind.
They're usually so robotic and dense, right?
Exactly. Why does aesthetics or rhythm matter in a strictly scientific document?
Well, it is really easy to dismiss this as just a stylistic quirk, but it actually speaks deeply to cognitive load and clarity of thought.
Really? How so?
Think about a clunky title that starts with a verb phrase, like, investigating the ways in which monks are helping to stop deforestation.
Oh, yeah, that's a mouthful.
It's passive. It's a process, not a defined entity.
It feels like you are reading someone's to-do list for the week.
Exactly. Now change it to a noun structure. The role of Buddhist monks in forest conservation.
Oh, wow. That has a declarative rhythm.
A melody.
It sounds so much more authoritative.
It does, but more importantly, it proves that the researcher has successfully synthesized a chaotic, complex process into a single, cohesive concept.
I see.
A title with melody shows that the researcher has achieved absolute clarity of thought. If your title is clunky, your conceptual framework is probably pretty clunky too.
That makes a ton of sense. You are elevating the research from a mere activity, something you are doing, to an established idea that can stick in the reader's mind.
Precisely.
All right, so you have your melodic title, your morally grounded problem, and your Buddhist methodology. You are finally ready to go out into the community and start your action participatory research, right?
Actually, no, you aren't allowed to take a single step forward yet.
What?
Before you conduct any original research, you have to look backward. You must conduct a literature review.
See, I always thought of the literature review as just an academic chore, like a bibliography on steroids, just to prove to the professor you read some book.
A lot of students feel that way.
But the way this course frames it, it is more like asking for directions before you walk into a minefield.
That is a brilliant way to put it. The source material is completely unequivocal about this. Compiling and processing existing academic results is mandatory.
Mandatory.
If you skip this, you are operating in pure arrogance.
It reminds me of walking into the middle of a movie theater.
Oh, I like this.
Yeah, you wouldn't sit down halfway through a complex thriller, watch the screen for 30 seconds, and then stand up and loudly announce your grand theory on who the killer is.
You would look ridiculous.
You would look like an idiot
You
because
know?
you missed the first hour of context. You have to lean over to the person next to you and whisper, hey, what happened before I got here?
Exactly.
The literature review is essentially asking the academic community to fill you in on the plot so you don't embarrass yourself.
And it serves very specific mechanical functions beyond just context. The slides list 7 key aims for doing it.
7 again.
Yes. For instance, if you don't even have a topic yet, the literature review generates questions. It shows you the history and evolution of an issue.
Right.
And if you are struggling to narrow down your topic, it shows you where the unanswered questions still are. It prevents you from duplicating someone else's hard work.
Which saves so much time.
It also establishes your conceptual framework, because you can see which variables previous researchers actually found useful.
It acts as a warning system, too. You can see the process problems and the dead ends that previous researchers ran into, and then adjust your own methodology to avoid them.
Exactly. But what is really interesting to me is how Dr. Wattanapradith emphasizes the post-research literature review.
Wait, hold on. Why are you reviewing literature after you already finished your experiment?
Because once you have your new data, you have to figure out what it actually means in the broader context.
Oh, I see.
Let's say your findings completely contradict the existing academic consensus. You don't just shrug and publish the paper. You have to return to the literature, dig into new theoretical concepts, and figure out why your discovery breaks the mold.
That's fascinating.
A literature review is what paves the way for you to discuss and explain your new knowledge to the world.
And the databases the students are instructed to use to find this literature really highlight the dual nature of this course.
They really do.
Because they are pointed to Scopus, which is, the massive global standard for peer-reviewed literature.
Right, the big one.
But they are also pointed to highly specialized regional databases. The TCI Taijo database, the BRIMCU, and the university's own eThesis portal.
That is such a crucial detail.
Why is that?
Well, if you only use a Western-centric database like Scopus, you are going to get a very specific Western-centric worldview on sociology and psychology.
That makes total sense.
By forcing students into the TCI Taijo database, they are tapping directly into the specialized local knowledge of Southeast Asia and Thai Buddhist scholarship.
Which is where they actually are.
Exactly. It grounds their global ambitions in the necessary local context.
So let's bring all this high-level theory down to the reality of the classroom for a minute.
Okay.
We have students who have learned about the gap, the Four Noble Truths methodology, noun melody, and these regional databases.
Yeah.
What is the ultimate test? What do they actually have to deliver to Dr. Wattanapradith at the end of the day?
The final slide of the deck gives us their assignment. And honestly, it is an exercise in extreme distillation.
I bet.
Working in pairs, the students have to select and read one peer-reviewed research article. Then they have to summarize it using only a single presentation slide.
Talk about forcing clarity. You can't hide behind a wall of text on one slide.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And using that single slide, they have to deliver a strict 3-minute presentation.
Wow, 3 minutes.
They must cover the title and author, the objective and methodology, and the key findings.
But the final instruction for this presentation is what really ties everything back to the beginning of our deep dive today.
Yeah, it's a great note.
The slide says, in bold, be ready to share your opinion on the article.
It comes full circle. You aren't just a parrot simply reciting data points about variables and sample sizes.
Right.
You are a moral agent. You have to critically engage with the methodology and the findings and actually defend your own perspective on the work.
And despite the intense rigor of all this, the strict formatting, the one slide, the 3 minutes, Dr. Wattanapradith ends the slides on such a warm note.
He really does.
He writes, if you have any questions or need clarification, please don't hesitate to ask. I'm looking forward to a great year together.
It's so welcoming.
It's a great reminder that behind all the intimidating academic structures and ancient philosophies, there is a mentor whose goal is to just help you succeed.
Well, it requires a lot of guidance to learn how to merge empirical data with spiritual wisdom. It's not easy.
No, it isn't. Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to take away from this. We've spent this deep dive exploring how a specific course in Thailand uses the Four Noble Truths, a framework originally designed to diagnose and end human suffering as a way to analyze modern social problems.
We discussed how research must be tied to national development and have large-scale beneficiaries, too.
Right. And if you look at the mechanics of this methodology, it implies something entirely profound about the nature of education itself.
It really does. In this framework, the pursuit of knowledge is never just an intellectual exercise to satisfy your own curiosity or to just earn a credential.
Gathering data is fundamentally meant to be an act of compassion.
Exactly. Research is the tool, but compassion is the engine.
So, as you go back to your own daily life today, whether you are reading a news article, trying to solve a bottleneck at the office, or looking at an issue in your neighborhood, ask yourself something.
Are you just collecting facts to sound smart?
Or are you actively seeking out the gaps, identifying the friction and suffering, and trying to build a bridge that actually helps someone cross?
Because if this deep dive has taught us anything, it's that the best methodology doesn't just study the world.
It heals it.